Legendary Passages, Episode 45, Antiope and Pirithous. The Amazon-Athenian War, from Plutarch's Life of Theseus. Last time, Heracles retrieved the girdle of the Amazon queen, and Theseus made off with their princess. The Amazons waged war to retrieve their princess, marching all the way to Athens. The war ends in a treaty, but Antiope dies after giving Theseus a son named Hippolytus. Plutarch then recounts the terrible love life of Theseus, including his abduction of a young Helen of Troy. Then we come to Pirithous, who stole his cattle, but was so brave and daring that they became the best of friends. Pirithous invited centaurs to his own wedding, but that party exploded into a war known as the Centauromachy. After both became widowed, they decided next to marry daughters of Zeus. Theseus stole Helen, while Pirithous desired Persephone, the wife of Hades. Next time, Heracles retrieves his last two objectives, Cerberus and Apples. Antiope and Pirithous, a legendary passage, from Plutarch's Life of Theseus, translated by Bernadotte Perrin. He also made a voyage to the Euxine Sea, as Philochorus and sundry others say, on a campaign with Heracles against the Amazons, and received Antiope as a reward of his valor. But the majority of writers, including Pherecydes, Hellanicus, and Herodotus, say that Theseus made this voyage on his own account, after the time of Heracles, and took the Amazon captive, and this is the more probable story. For it is not recorded that anyone else among those who shared his expedition took an Amazon captive. And Bion says that even this Amazon he took and carried off by means of a stratagem. The Amazons, he says, were naturally friendly to men, and did not fly from Theseus when he touched upon their coasts, but actually sent him presents, and he invited the one who brought them to come aboard his ship. She came on board, and he put out to sea. And a certain Menecrates, who published a history of the Bithynian city of Nicaea, says that Theseus, with Antiope on board his ship, spent some time in those parts, and that there chanced to be with him on this expedition 3 young men of Athens who were brothers, Euneos, Thoas, and Solois. This last, he says, fell in love with Antiope, unbeknown to the rest, and revealed his secret to one of his intimate friends. That friend made overtures to Antiope, who positively repulsed the attempt upon her, but treated the matter with discretion and gentleness, and made no denunciation to Theseus. Then Solois, in despair, threw himself into a river and drowned himself, and Theseus, when he learned the fate of the young man, and what had caused it, was grievously disturbed, and in his distress called to mind a certain oracle which he had once received at Delphi. For it had been there joined upon him by the Pythian priestess, that, when in a strange land he should be sorest vexed and full of sorrow, he should found a city there, and leave some of his followers to govern it. For this cause he founded a city there, and called it, from the Pythian god, Pythopolis, and the adjacent river Solois, in honor of the young man. And he left there the brothers of Solois, to be the city's presidents and lawgivers, and with them Hermas, one of the noblemen of Athens. From him also the Pythopolitans call a place in the city the house of Hermes, incorrectly changing the second syllable, and transferring the honor from a hero to a god. Well then, such were the grounds for the war of the Amazons, which seems to have been no trivial nor womanish enterprise for Theseus. For they would not have pitched their camp within the city, nor fought hand-to-hand battles in the neighborhood of Pnyx and the Museum, had they not mastered the surrounding country and approached the city with impunity. Whether now, as Hellanicus writes, they came round by the Cimmerian Bosphorus, which they crossed on the ice, may be doubted, but the fact that they encamped almost in the heart of the city is attested both by the names of the localities there and by the graves of those who fell in battle. Now for a long time there was hesitation and delay on both sides in making the attack, but finally Theseus, after sacrificing to fear in obedience to an oracle, joined battle with the women. This battle, then, was fought on the day of the month Boedromion, on which, down to the present time, the Athenians celebrate the Boedromia. Clidamus, who wishes to be minute, writes that the left wing of the Amazons extended to what is now called the Amazonian, and that with their right they touched the Pnyx at Crissa. That with this left wing the Athenians fought, engaging the Amazons from the museum, and that the graves of those who fell are on either side of the street, which leads to the gate by the chapel of Chalcedon, which is now called the Periac Gate. Here, he says, the Athenians were routed and driven back by the women as far as the shrine of the Eumenides, but those who attacked the invaders from the Palladium, and Artidas, and the Lyceum, drove their right wing back as far as their camp, and slew many of them. And after 3 months, he says, a treaty of peace was made through the agency of Hippolyta, for Hippolyta is the name which Clidamus gives to the Amazon whom Theseus married, not Antiope. But some say that the woman was slain with a javelin by Malpadia while fighting at Theseus's side, and that the pillar which stands by the sanctuary of Olympian earth was set up in her memory. And it is not astonishing that history, when dealing with events of such great antiquity, should wander in uncertainty. Indeed, we are also told that the wounded Amazons were secretly sent away to Chalcis by Antiope, and were nursed there, and some were buried there, near what is now called the Amazonium. That the war ended in a solemn treaty is attested not only by the naming of the place adjoining the Theseum, which is called Horcomesium, but also by the sacrifice which, in ancient times, was offered to the Amazons before the festival of Theseus. And the Megarians, too, show a place in their country where Amazons were buried, on the way from the marketplace to the place called Rus, where the rhomboid stands. And it is said, likewise, that others of them died near Chaeronea, and were buried on the banks of a little stream which, in ancient times, as it seems, was called Thermodon, but nowadays Haemon, concerning which names I have written in my Life of Demosthenes. It appears also that not even Thessaly was traversed by the Amazons without opposition, for Amazonian graves are to this day shown in the vicinity of Scotusa and Cynocephalae. So much, then, is worthy of mention regarding the Amazons. For the insurrection of the Amazons, written by the author of the Theseid, telling how, when Theseus married Phaedra, Antiope and the Amazons who fought to avenge her attacked him, and were slain by Heracles, has every appearance of fable and engine. Theseus did, indeed, marry Phaedra, but this was after the death of Antiope, and he had a son by Antiope, Hippolytus, or, as Pindar says, Demophon. As for the calamities which befell Phaedra, the son of Theseus, by Antiope, since there is no conflict here between the historians and tragic poets, we must suppose that they happened as represented by the poets uniformly. There are, however, other stories also about marriages of Theseus, which were neither honorable in their beginnings, nor fortunate in their endings, but these have not been dramatized. For instance, he is said to have carried off Anaxo, a maiden of Trozen, and after slaying Sinis and Circean, to have ravished their daughters. Also to have married Periobia, the mother of Ajax, and Pharaboia afterwards, and Diope, the daughter of Iphicles, and because of his passion for Aegae, the daughter of Panopeus, as I have already said, he is accused of the desertion of Ariadne, which was not honorable nor even decent. And finally, his rape of Helen is said to have filled Attica with war, and to have brought about at last his banishment and death, of which things I shall speak a little later. Of the many exploits performed in those days by the bravest men, Herodorus thinks that Theseus took part in none, except that he aided the Lapithae in their war with the centaurs, but others say he was not only with Jason at Colchis, but helped Meleager to slay the Caledonian boar, and that hence arose the proverb, not without Theseus, that he himself, however, without asking for any ally, performed many glorious exploits, and that the phrase, "Lo, another Heracles," became current with reference to him. He also aided Adrastus in recovering for burial the bodies of those who had fallen before the walls of Cadmea, not by mastering the Thebans in battle, as Euripides has it in his tragedy, but by persuading them with a truce, for so most writers say, and Philochorus adds that this was the first truce ever made for recovering bodies of those slain in battle, although in the accounts of Heracles it is written that Heracles was the first to give back their dead to his enemies. And the graves of the greater part of those who fell before Thebes are shown at Eleutherae, and those of the commanders near Eleusis, and this last burial was a favor which Theseus showed to Adrastus. The account of Euripides and his supplicants is disproved by that of Aeschylus and his Eleusinians, where Theseus is made to relate the matter, as above. The friendship of Pirithous and Theseus is said to have come about in the following manner. Theseus had a very great reputation for strength and bravery, and Pirithous was desirous of making a test and proof of it. Accordingly, he drove Theseus's cattle away from Marathon, and when he learned that their owner was pursuing him in arms, he did not fly, but turned back and met him. When, however, each beheld the other with astonishment at his beauty and admiration of his daring, they refrained from battle, and Pirithous, stretching out his hand the first, bade Theseus himself be judge of his robbery, for he would willingly submit to any penalty which the other might assign. Then Theseus not only remitted his penalty, but invited him to be a friend and brother in arms, whereupon they ratified their friendship with oaths. After this, when Pirithous was about to marry Diademia, he asked Theseus to come to the wedding and see the country, and become acquainted with the Lapithae. Now he had invited the centaurs also to the wedding feast, and when these were flown with insolence and wine, and laid hands upon the women, the Lapithae took vengeance upon them. Some of them they slew on the spot, the rest they afterwards overcame in war, and expelled from the country, Theseus fighting with them at the banquet and in the war. Herodorus, however, says that this was not how it happened, but that the war was already in progress when Theseus came to the aid of the Lapithae, and that on his way thither he had his first sight of Heracles, having made it his business to seek him out at Trachis, where the hero was already resting from his wandering and labors. And he says the interview passed with mutual expressions of honor, friendliness, and generous praise. Notwithstanding, one might better side with those historians who say that the heroes had frequent interviews with one another, and that it was at the instigation of Theseus that Heracles was initiated to the mysteries at Eleusis, and purified before his initiation, when he requested it on account of sundry rash acts. Theseus was already 50 years old, according to Hellanicus, when he took part in the rape of Helen, who was not of marriageable age. Wherefore some writers, thinking to correct this heaviest accusation against him, say that he did not carry off Helen himself, but when Idas and Lycinus had carried her off, he received her in charge, and watched over her, and would not surrender her to the Dioscuri when they demanded her. Or, if you will believe it, that her own father, Tyndareus, entrusted her to Theseus, for fear of Anarsphorus, the son of Hippocrene, who sought to take Helen by force while she was yet a child. But the most probable account, and that which has the most witnesses in her favor, is as follows. Theseus and Pirithous went to Sparta in company, seized the girl as she was dancing in the temple of Artemis Orthia, and fled away with her. Their pursuers followed them no farther than Nicaea, and so the two friends, when they had passed through the Peloponnesus and were out of danger, made a compact with one another that the one on whom the lot fell should have Helen to wife, but should assist the other in getting another wife. With this mutual understanding they cast lots, and Theseus won, and taking the maiden, who was not yet ripe for marriage, conveyed her to Aphidna. Here he made his mother a companion of the girl, and committed both to Aphidnus, a friend of his, with strict orders to guard them in complete secrecy. Then he himself, to return the service of Pirithous, journeyed with him to Epirus, in quest of the daughter of Euneos, the king of the Milesians. This man called his wife Persephone, and his daughter Cora, and his dog Cerberus, with which beast he ordered that all suitors of his daughter should fight, promising her to him that should overcome it. However, when he learned that Pirithous and his friend were come not to woo, but to steal away his daughter, he seized them both. Pirithous he put out of the way at once by means of the dog, but Theseus he kept in close confinement.